just want to get started. I mean, I like when me and Bob talked about doing a panel, I had a bunch of thoughts that I like with doing comics, doing really long form comics. I'd done so many and done it for so long, and I realized it's something that nobody really talks about, but it seems like there's a lot, especially you know, people just coming into comics, just getting started. There's so many people that seem like that's what they want to do. They don't want to just you know, make a little short comic. They want to do these long epic things, and there's so much knowledge you could kind of share, or there's so many things that you could, or even just, you know, what's going on, you know, for someone who's first, you know, starting out, what, you know, what's on their mind. So I just I don't know what experiences you guys have had, just that it's changed. When you first started your series, your idea of what you were working on has changed, hasn't it?
Yes.
Would you like to expound upon that?
Well, when I first started doing Plastic Farm, it was actually just going to be a little mini comic about this one night where I got really drunk and wrecked my car and woke up and remembered that I'd gotten drunk and wrecked my car the night before. And while I was drawing that, I had just started a new job, graduated college, and a buddy of mine that I just met said that he was into comics too. So I didn't want to show him that sort of thing. Here's my first impression of it. I'm an alcoholic and I wreck cars. So I decided to draw a picture of a dinosaur and a cowboy that rides on that. And then I started doing that comic, and I had to figure out a way. Well, maybe I can merge these two things, this little slice of life story about an alcoholic and this cowboy that rides a dinosaur. And thus Plastic Farm was born, of merging two completely unrelated ideas together, which then just spawned, made me realize that, well, everything I write can now be part of this series. So now it's gigantic. And I'm about 600 pages into it, and I'm about a quarter of the way done.
Yeah. And that's kind of, is that a scary point to be at for you, to be that, have invested that much time into it and realize that, wow, if I thought it was tough that first bit, I still got a long way to go, and, you know.
Well, I'm sure it's the same way with everybody else, is that you look back and say, well, it took me this long to get to this point. I really need to start drawing faster before
devoting more time.
Yeah.
You change your strategy, and that's exactly something that happened to me too, where I thought, as I went on, and I mean, I was talking to Michael yesterday about this a little bit, but there's a lot of these long series that start out where you can tell the author was full of ambition, and the story is just slowly unfolding. One that comes to mind is Alan Moore's Miracle Man series, or Marvel Man, where it's sort of a moment-by-moment story that slowly unfolds, and it really pulls you in. And then you could tell that a lot of years had passed, and even though not a lot of pages had passed, there's years where he wasn't working on it, and then he came back to it, and then it sort of rushes to the end. It sort of runs to the end, sprints to the end a little bit, and you almost wish that it had continued. But I mean, we're only human beings, and something that you're fascinated with when you're 20 and say, this is going to be my life's work. By the time you're 30, you're not the same. You're not that same guy. And I don't and so as I'm in that stage where I'm thinking, how can I be more economical? How can what is, and all of this thinking is thinking that I probably should have done at the beginning, but I just didn't know what I was in for. But so now, starting a new series, I'm able to do that now, because I fortunately had the practice of spending 10 years making these long epic stories, and now I'm okay, I can do this. I can leave this part out. I can keep this. Just trying to get more mileage out of your things, and definitely streamlining the art. Is a big part of that too.
Well, Alex, when you started this series, did you start knowing that it was going to be so ambitious in scope?
Yes and no. I'd had the idea for what would become the first volume of this, which is 170-ish pages. And, you know, I'd had the idea for the rest of the story beyond that, but I hadn't yet decided whether I was going to keep going with it or not when I finished the first volume. And the few readers that I had at that point said that they really did want to hear more from me, so that was the kind of tipping point that made me go on and finish the rest of it, too.
Okay.
That's gauging, like, you know, like reader reaction is, you know, like that seems to me to be really, really important. And like the person I think of as like the success story, and not just because he's successful, like in a like career sense, but successful that I think he really executed something really well, is like, you know, Jeff Smith. And he, like, I know he said that he liked doing his, not even as like, you know, standalone graphic novels like some of us do, but you know, putting it out as single issues, because it gave him that reader feedback, so he could sort of course correct. And I mean, you don't pander, you don't do just what you think you want people to see, but it does give you an indication of when you're really hitting it, you know, when you're really, you know, on target.
Yeah, but you don't want to rely on that feedback too much, because
for sure, yeah.
I mean, the whole point of self-publishing is you have the freedom to do what you want to do. Well, there's two series that I'm working on that are kind of epic in scope. One is it's kind of how you started Plastic Farm, because it was not intended to be big, and that was this story, which was originally printed as a mini comic called This Eternal Flaw. Originally, actually, it wasn't even intended to be a mini comic. It was just little tiny drawings that I did on a piece of paper about that big, that I took to Chicago in the 90s, and I was showing around people, and they were like laughing at it. Later on, I blew up, the art was drawn about this big, okay? Later on, I blew it up to mini comic size. Made a mini comic out of it. Got a Xeric grant in the early 90s to publish this comic book reaction details, and I started printing it in here. And once I started doing these stories of these weird characters and these weird situations, I started making connections between them like you did, and saying, why not merge all these different things together into one cohesive whole, one cohesive universe. And so that's pretty much where I've started over again. But these are part of the canon. Started over with a new comic series called The Signifiers, and it takes place in a universe that I've created, which explains and adheres everything that I've created in these different stories into one cohesive whole. And so there's that. And then this other comic, online comic strip I'm doing called The Mesh, is kind of like a pulp noir, funny, serious story that is, I was telling Tom yesterday, if you've ever seen a Jacques Tati movie, it's almost like a Jacques Tati movie in the sense that it's deliberately very, very slow. It's told in real time. And like you were saying about artists wanting to speed up the ending in order to get it done, my goal is to not do that.
That takes a huge effort too, and real, you know, vision and conviction, and almost like a physical effort too, because, you know, we're talking about years of life.
I know. Well, see, I mean, and I'm steadfast that I want to continue with this and finish it as long as it takes.
Yeah, I really admire that, for sure. Yeah,
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it's a complex story that basically it's how the lives of 5 families intertwine, all having to do with this vigilante. And the first scene I just finished a couple weeks ago, and that was 80 panels, and that took me almost 2 years to do. But it's all told very deliberately, very slowly, on purpose, because that's the way the story works. If I sped it up, I would be cheating myself and like cheating the reader. I don't want to.
Takes as long as it's going to take.
Exactly. Yeah. I want to give it its due, because it's a free online comic strip. I have the freedom to do that.
Yeah.
You know, if no one has, I mean, I'm doing it to please myself. No one else has to read it.
I think every artist, like whatever it is you're working on, if you're, you know, sort of like a professional artist, if you're working on something as like your livelihood or even, you know, or a partial livelihood, you should also have something that you're doing like at the same time, like off to the side, that is exactly what you're describing, something that is purely your personal vision, purely, you know, for your own expression.
And
I think yeah, exactly. And they end up sort of cross-pollinating, like the one sort of improves the other or feeds the other. And something that I'm noticing just in this conversation, that